If someone asks you what do you learn today for every single day, would you always have an answer? The more that I learned about myself, the more that I realized that I'm someone who gained a lot of pleasure from intellectual stimulation. And I confirmed this by taking a strength finder test recently and found that my number one strength is the love of learning, which means I just have a passion for learning as its own sake. And they say that to be happy, you need to leverage your strength as much as possible. And I guess that's why I really enjoyed the 50 books a year challenge that I did in 2018. Of course, it was challenging, but because I really enjoyed the process, it made it so much easier for me to complete the challenge. So having this realization, I was thinking what a similar challenge that I could do that gives me a lot of intellectual stimulation that I can squeeze within a month. And by this point during the pandemic, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, and podcasts are really becoming a hit. I have a lot of friends who turned into public figures starting their own podcast show. So I thought, why not listen to podcasts for 30 days? Of course, listening to podcasts alone is not really a challenge, it's just consuming. So I decided to dial it up a notch, and instead of just listening, I will also summarize the takeaways of every single episode I listened to for 30 days. I'm also particularly motivated to do this to hone my listening skill. I'm not really good at processing information through the audio form. I don't feel that I was comprehending the information as much as I was while I was reading. So usually when I listen to podcasts while working out, I tend to have a lot of thoughts in my head that pull my attention away from listening to the content. I also found that the best way to absorb knowledge is to teach it to someone else. When we're summarizing, synthesizing, that is activating a different parts of our brain that's a lot more active versus the passive part of our brain that is just consuming. And like they say, the neurons that fire together wire together. So the more that we could make sense of a piece of information in our own way, the more that it will be retained in our brain. And that's why I'll be summarizing and sharing the takeaways with my friends on social media for each episode that I listen to. In terms of what I listen to, usually it varies based on what I feel like I'm curious about that day. Typically my go-to content is like self-development or startups, but recently I've been very interested in the bigger things of life, such as society, the future of how we live, the technology and how it's influencing our lives. So my number one go-to podcast now has been The Future Thinkers. It's a great combination of consciousness, the future of society, blockchain, AI, and permaculture and climate change. So it has a really good mix of everything that I'm interested in. I also like Complexity by Santa Fe Institute, which looks at how things are that we really can't explain with science right now, and people who are really diving into them to explain the unexplainable. And for those who know me know that I'm very into consciousness. So I really like the Flow Sessions by Jason Silva and the Evolver. I don't think they produce any new episodes right now, but they have a really good backlog of neuroscientists, philosophers speaking about the science of our existence, from like the MDMA therapy to how we cope with our trauma and living in awe and wonder. Something related, I also like the topic of human performance. So I really like Zestology, the Bulletproof podcast, as well as the Superhuman Academy. For business, I discovered a new podcast called The Business Casual. Really good tidbits of business trends and this upcoming startups and technology. I also really love Exponential View by Harvard Business Review. For general knowledge, I really like the Freakonomics as well as the Knowledge Project. And sometimes when I don't feel like going into anything that's too intellectual or too heady and just need a little bit of boost in my mood and my spirit, my go-to podcast is The Purpose by Jay Shetty. And recently I really loved Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. She is my hero, one of the reasons why I opened up and become so comfortable in being so vulnerable, and she just has a lot of really good resources around that, on how to deal with shame, on how to be more vulnerable, and what's the science and meaning behind it. As you can see, I have a very diverse range of interests. It's kind of like in Indonesian we call it rojak. It's just a mixture of all different types of ingredients, sweet, sour, bitter. I guess I've also naturally developed this intellectual balance sensor. Like if I feel that I'm diving too deep into the rabbit hole of a particular topic, I'll be very conscious of that and pull myself out and try to see what other topics that I need to wrap my head around and really learn more about. Also, beyond the list of podcasts that I subscribe to, sometimes I just feel that I am very interested and curious about a particular topic because something that someone brought up in a conversation or something that came to my mind out of nowhere, such as, oh, why is capitalism bad? Ooh, what's particularly interesting about this part of my consciousness? And I will just go to Spotify, just key in the keywords of these topics I'm interested in, and then I will look through the list and see what particular episodes that might really fit this curiosity that I'm feeling. So I discovered a couple of new podcasts through through this experience. Once I settle on an episode, I usually listen to them during my workout. As a productivity freak, I always want to maximize my time, and I felt like audio is something that I can process in the background while doing something that is menial or doesn't require that much brain power. So my brain can be used to focus on processing and consuming meaningful content, while my body can be used to do something else that is productive. And they call it habit stacking. So it has become a great motivation source. So when I felt like I was lazy to work out, and I thought, hey, I'm gonna gain this intellectual pleasure while working out, so that gives me additional boost to want to go ahead and do my workout. And apart from that, I listen to podcasts while I'm cooking or walking to somewhere or commuting or in transition to somewhere else. So most of the time I listen to podcasts while I was doing something else. There's also time when I intentionally set the time to just listen to podcasts, and I found that it's become a healthy substitute to my unproductive ways of procrastinating. So usually when I felt like I wasn't really down to do anything difficult or important, I will go to like YouTube, watch like mindless content, or go to social media and just really wasting my time. But this time I have a new source of entertainment that was healthy and meaningful. So instead of go to my podcast, lie on the couch, and just really relax and listen to something that not only just gives me entertainment, a space for me to take a break from, also the intellectual stimulation and the knowledge that will add to my personal growth. So while listening to the podcast, something new that I added to my habit is to take notes on my phone. So any key points, interesting quotes, I'll make sure that I jot it down, so that at the end of the day, I'll take the time to look through all the notes that I've taken and synthesize and summarize them into 3 key takeaways that I could then share on my social media. Though as you can imagine, it does take a lot more effort to take notes and to synthesize and to position it in a way that is digestible on social media. However, I feel that by doing so, it helps me to retain the knowledge that I've absorbed so much more. The more that we engage in a topic or a piece of information, the more that we activate our brain to process it, the more that we can remember it. And because I chose a lot of habit topics, often I didn't comprehend the whole information right away. So I often have to like rewind a few seconds, or even after I finished the whole episode, I was just like, this is so complicated. And then I have to re-listen like a few more times. There's a few episodes I have to listen 2 times or 3 times to really grasp the full gist of it. And sometimes I even go to the extent of using a software to transcribe the whole episode so that I could read through the text and really understand what's going on. Like, how often have you listened to a podcast and go, that's an interesting one, but what did I actually take away from it? So this exercise has allowed me to make the most out of every single podcast I listen to by making sure there's something meaningful that I can take away and share with my social media. I also happen to be featured in a podcast during the challenge. I spoke about habits, how to cultivate a good one, how to sustain it, and how to break away from your bad habits. So if you're interested, I'll put the link in the down below. Just for fun, I also summarized my own episode, which is interesting to listen back to like my stream of consciousness during that time and properly digest. I've mentioned a few key important things that I think are helpful for me to share with my friends. So overall, I found that it's a very rewarding journey. I really enjoy my mind getting expanded, and over time it became like something I look forward to, like because I have this queue of content that I have curated that I put in the list to listen to next. I will like wake up and go, what's next on my list? So another benefit that I noticed was, of course, I became a more active listener. I couldn't afford to get distracted much because I know that if I miss a few points, I have to rewind, and that will be additional pain that I have to go through. So over time, I trained myself to become very attentive to what I'm listening to. I felt like my monkey mind has definitely been tamed down a lot. I found that it's become a really good mindfulness practice as well. Mindfulness is all about paying attention to your thoughts and noticing them. During this exercise, every time I notice that, oh gosh, I'm drifting to another thought, I will like rewind for a few seconds on the episode and consciously direct my attention to the podcast again. So in conclusion, my month has definitely been a lot more enriching, and I felt like it's really true when I leverage my strength, that's when I become happier. Like on the days where I felt jaded, when I felt like my life is not going anywhere, or just, most of it is because of chemical imbalance. Listening to something that is meaningful and something unique, that novel and inspiring, get me out of that dull state and put me into a state where I feel curious, a sense of wonder and awe. So listening to podcasts or even just learning something new every single day is definitely something I want to continue on. Something I don't want to continue, however, is forcing myself to listening to an episode to the end. Sometimes the content is just really not that good, but because I was already halfway in, I felt there's a sunk cost incurred, and I felt the pressure to want to finish to the end or have to rewind a few times just to find something that I could learn and find the takeaways from. So I want to have that flexibility and confidence to quit a content halfway and move on to something new that is more meaningful if I really want to. Alright, just for fun, I'm going to do a quick 1-minute lightning round to share as many one-line takeaways as possible just to show how much I could retain the information, and honestly, just for fun. Okay, ready? 1 minute and go. COVID-19 vaccine. The problem doesn't stop when we found the vaccine. The next challenge is how do we scale it effectively and fairly? Will healthcare become a privilege or a human right? The glaciers. The glaciers in Peru, hundreds of them that have been there for hundreds and thousands of years, were gone in 30 years. And glaciers are critical to provide clean water and to reflect heat back, so we need to pay serious attention into the issue of global warming. Plastic. Plastic can be turned into value and a commodity. Anything can be turned into commodity as long as you attach value to it, and imagine people won't want to throw cash away, and we'll solve the plastic issue. Love is the highest source of energy and power, so we need to tap into it as much as we can. Shame. Everyone has it. Everyone is afraid to talk about it, but the more that we don't talk about it, the more the power that it has on us. We need to move away from individual problems to systemic problems. Our environment has much more influence on our bad behaviors than we think, and we need to focus on solving systemic issues. Okay. Actually, I have much more to share, but I guess that's 1 minute. So I'm gonna make sure to share all my favorite podcast links in the description down below, as well as a link to a Facebook album where I store screenshots of all the podcast takeaways that I've shared on Instagram, so you could refer to them if you want to or if you're interested. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.